Well, hello and welcome to today's show. Today's show was really not planned in the schedule, but I had just finished pulling some Cat 6 and reestablishing my inside the house network after we moved, the where the router is in the home and we lost our wired connection. I prefer a wired connection. The algos apparently saw that I was looking at switches and gear and whatever, and they sent me a video that said, which is faster, Ethernet or Wi-Fi? And the guy came to the conclusion that Ethernet is. And that's not a bad conclusion, but it's a generalization. We'll talk about it right after we roll the intro. Well, let me ask you a question right off the bat before we go too much further, because I think this is like the crux of the whole situation. At least what bothers me. Which is bigger, a cat or a dog? Well, in our mind, we have a picture, but I mean, is it a Chihuahua and a Bengal tiger, in which case the cat is bigger? Or is it, an English Mastiff and, say, a little kitten, a little tabby kitten of some sort? So that's kind of what we're getting at. I don't know if you can necessarily say one is faster without actually comparing the apple, the specific apple, to the specific orange. All right, let's look over here at our main screen. We're going to look at the first question because Wi-Fi can be quite fast. Now, this little paragraph right here that I have pulled up, obviously it's going to depend on what type of cat or dog, but nowadays with Wi-Fi 6 being fairly old, we're already starting with Wi-Fi 7s. I see birthing persons boards that have Wi-Fi 7s, although I live out in the country and it took me till last year before we got off the DSL onto the fiber optics, where I could do gigabit and above. So I have Wi-Fi 6, it says by encoding, but I don't have the 6 gig frequency. I go 2.5 and 5. And we'll talk about frequency in just a second. So Wi-Fi 4 is going to be slower, just like USB 3 is slower than 4, and 4 is 5. And, you look at your PCIe, so each generation you go up significantly. Well, the basic we have here for Wi-Fi 6 is it says it can go almost 10 gigabits, and that's faster than my Ethernet runs. So I might think that my Wi-Fi 6 in my house, I live in the country, is going to be faster than, say, average. And maybe it's a little bit faster than average. But in reality, when I just do a file transfer, it's nowhere near that speed. It's nowhere near that speed. And I think it's largely because in my house, my Spectra, there is a lot going on. I have 3 different types of cameras set up, one of which constantly spools to the cloud and back. That's where it gets its AI. The AI is remote, it's not local. And I'm not a very techno type guy, but I've got another set of cameras, and I got a security system. They're off on the Wi-Fi, thermostats on the Wi-Fi. I've got a few lights are on the Wi-Fi, lamps are on the Wi-Fi. Some priority type of things on the well that give me some little readings and data, and the remote control to the proofer and the modified refrigerator for meats and stuff. And so the next thing you know, you've got a lot of stuff, as well as your TV and your Roku devices or your Amazon Fire. I don't have those, but you get the idea of the streaming TV. Without thinking about it, you may have quite a loaded up Wi-Fi. And one of the things you can do is, if you have something that will do 5 gigahertz, is to get as much off of 2.5 onto the 5. And if you have 6 available, get them on the 6, where even your neighbors, if they're broadcasting, may not be in those bands. So you can decongest your band and get your speed up, even though you may not necessarily go to the different encoding techniques. You can just get them a little bit faster if you go to a less busy space, because the air is the air, and you don't own the air, and it's just whoever signal is the strongest, right? All right, let me interrupt you now because I want to point myself out this little bit of data. If we look at this I have pulled up right here. Let me zoom in a little bit more. I'm asking the question about channels because I want to talk a little bit about channel congestion. I've discussed it. Maybe it's a little bit before, a little bit after this, but the reality is if you can get off of, the general takeaway is, if you can stay off of the 2.4 gigahertz frequency for your Wi-Fi, you're already helping yourself out, regardless of the generation of Wi-Fi that you have, the compression or whatever, the channels themselves, the physical channels that exist in the air, obviously 2.4 is the oldest, and so it's going to have the most devices that work on it. There's some technical difference in how much energy it takes, so you might find 2.4 to be very crowded. And when we look at this right here, it says, let's pull this up, different Wi-Fi generations operate on different frequency bands, 2.4 gigs, 5 gigs, 6 gigs, with each band supporting a specific number of channels. That's how that possibly helps. Plus, 2.4 is going to propagate, probably, if I remember my theory, my wave theory, it's going to propagate a little bit longer and a little bit better than, say, 6 will, because 6 is going to be a shorter wavelength. 2.4 has 14 channels in total. Non-overlapping 20 megahertz channels, only 3 non-overlapping channels are available, typically 1, 6, and 11. So you want to make note of that. 1, 6, and 11. Those are non-overlapping. There are 14 overall, but if it's got to go do that channel switching thing as it seeks to find a less chattery channel, and if you're in an apartment complex, that's going to have something to do with it, or high-rise, it depends on the signals and all that. It's just more noise is going to have more negotiation, and it's going to spend more time not actually talking at speed in a given segment, but trying to find a clear space to be heard. All right. So that's the old stuff. So try to stay off of the 2.4. 5 is better. I think it's going to be a little bit more range limited, because if the watts are the same, just because of the propagation, it's 5. It's going to be more line of sight. Here it says there are 20 megahertz channels. There are 24 non-overlapping 20 megahertz channels. 40 megahertz channels. You can also bond channels to create 12 overlapping 40 megahertz channel. That would be twice the bandwidth. Obviously, you see 20 megahertz to 40. 2 is half of 4. 80 megahertz, 60, 160 megahertz as we go with the 5 gigahertz band. Now, this is too technical for me to use and you to use, but it's a good idea that we want to stay away from the 2.4 and go to the 5 gig. And also the 6 gig, which my router won't do, has even better capability. You see, there's not going to be as many people on that 6 gigahertz, including me, because my router won't do it. So when you get there, you would have, out of 20 megahertz channels, right, 59 channels. That's different channels that are differentiable for your data route. So when it gets right down to it, again, this is one of those things that you can't necessarily say, Wi-Fi is better or worse. It's certainly cheaper to install. It's certainly more flexible to install. And if you're maybe in a short room where no walls are obstruction, you got good signal, and your walls are obstructing other people's signals, and you're on a high frequency, you may get some amazing bandwidth or transmission. In my case, I'm going to show you at the end. I do a test at nothing special about my house or my installation, but we'll look at it and see what do we actually get. So right before we look at Ethernet, I want to hit this one more time. So Wi-Fi 6, which is pretty common right now, is up to just about 10 gigabits per second, but practically you're probably around 600 megabits per second or 4.8 gigabits per second, somewhere in this range, of practical range or so Google says. Now the Ethernet depends on which Ethernet you have. They want to tell you right off the bat 10 megabits per second to 400 gigabits per second. That's a wide range. This is the old stuff. Token ring coax, we used to do around 10 base T or 10 megabits per speed. Pretty slow, but it was better than sneaker knitting it from one machine to the other. Then we had 10 base T. So this was sort of the 10 and the 10 and the 100, right? But Wi-Fi is probably going to be faster than these two in a lot of cases. But now we step up to gigabit. Well, that's 10 times the 100, right? And we have, of course, the 10 gigabit, which is obviously 100 times the 100. So, yeah, it's really going to depend on which Ethernet you have. Now, the biggest difference I see is if I go to wire, I have to pretty well much own the place I'm in to run the wire from one machine to the other. It's going to be an expensive proposition if I have to pay somebody to do it. It's not going to be particularly flexible, and it's just what it is. Now, I bought a switch versus a hub. Let's talk about that right now. All right, when we look at what the difference between a switch and a hub is, a hub takes information in and broadcasts it to each of the ports, regardless. A switch takes it and it learns the MAC address. Down here is what it says. The function, the switch learns the MAC address, or the media access control layer. And what it does is it says, I know that this PC has this MAC address and this other PC, and if I'm just going to go from A to B, these are the only ports that I talk to. And it routes it that way, which makes it more secure, typically more efficient, and it's just better all the way around, because you can't sniff a packet sitting out at the road with a radio. You actually would have to get into that wire to catch that, to see that traffic, so it can be a little bit faster. Now we look at this, it talks about a hub. The function is simple and quick. We just broadcast in. This says it is half duplex. It's inefficient. It offers poor security because every computer that can see that on that hub can see the same traffic. It just ignores it when it doesn't, the packets don't match their destination. Yeah, and it's very simple. Now, the switch is more efficient. It has better security because it's only piping it from one port to the other, straight across. They are more expensive. And, they work, I think, a treat nowadays in your own home to use a switch versus a hub. I would buy switch over hub, and I did. I bought both. So I would prefer, especially at the prices we have these days through Amazon or something like that, they're very reasonable. So we've got that. So the next thing is, can a switch handle multiple traffic simultaneously? And yes, a switch, according to the Google, says yes, a switch can handle simultaneous traffic. Unlike a hub, switches are full duplex communication, which allows devices to send and receive data concurrently, which significantly improves the network performance. Hubs, on the other hand, use half duplex communication, meaning only one device can transmit at a time, leading to potential collisions. Really not unlike the frequency collision, the use for Wi-Fi. So yeah, if you're using a hub, it still may be Ethernet, it still may be on the speeds, but if you can only do half duplex, you're only half speed there because you're either transmitting or you're receiving. That's it. So again, that's one of those things like what's bigger, the cat or the dog, depends on what cat, what dog, what we're talking about. Whew, just about out of breath. And we're getting ready to get to the little system. I'll show you what little bit of a network I have. It's very, very super simple. I think if I could do something like this, you can too. But there's one last thing I want to talk to you about. I'm not going to look at the hardware so much, but when we look at this, what's the difference between a managed switch and an unmanaged switch? Well, the first thing you need to know is you're going to pay more for a managed switch than an unmanaged. And most of us, we just like the plug and play. We don't want to have to go in there and tinker with any ports and say this port is limited to this much time or this much connectivity during the day. We're not running an office, and so, or a factory, anything like that. So we just don't need those advanced features. We just want something that we can plug our little wires in, screw it to the wall, and be done. All right, let's go look at the little bit of a video, and I'll show you what I did. It's not too much. Ooh, we got a thing from Amazon. What is in that? Well, look, it's a cable and an Ethernet card, but we already have Ethernet right there. Yes, but it's not 5 gigabit Ethernet or 2.5 gigabit Ethernet. We got a 2.5-inch switch upstairs. If you like this content, please go to calldeltosell.com, find the tab that says on YouTube, click it, and it'll open up a page of QR codes. There you can use a smartphone to scan and get to the YouTube page, or you can just mouse over and click it on a PC. There you'll be able to subscribe to this little button over here and click the notification bell. Well, we have a cute little 1-bit card, 1-lane card, 5 gigabit. It should do 5, and then 2.5, and of course 1. I have one already built in, but we don't have the other. And look, there we have our driver download. Maybe it's sketchy. I don't know. What's the back look like? Ooh, PCIe to 5 gig LAN card, made in China. There we go. So we're going to pop that in this little case. We just got to get her sides off. And there it is plugged in. We just need to put the cable in and turn her on. Well, here we have our glass, our fiber optic GigaSpire, our ISP. See, we got our little green light. Right, we got 4 ports on the back. We're using 3 of them. Right here we do have our our glass in the white. We've got our telephone in the black. This is an extra telephone that just goes to that ancient wireless jack. So if I'm in here, I can pick up the phone without having to go too far. That's your backup power supply with all the goodies on it, including this mess right here. Well, look at this. Isn't this cute? Looks like somebody finally got around to buying a label maker. So here we have on the black and the blue, the little stripey here with the little shrink tubing. That one just goes to the beast. You see we do have two green lights. We have the other one to the far left. That's the one we just put that Chinese nick in. Well, hey, old man, let me interrupt you right there to make a point about the wire. Now, I have two samples I pulled out. The gray is 5E, and the black is 6E. And that's a standard. It's just a little bit above, as the manufacturers say. They're supposed to be a little bit better, a little more competent at the signal specs than the 6 or the 5. Now, one of the things I want you to notice, though, right off the bat, let me see if I can get them oriented in a fashion. All right, is the black wire you see has a white core. Let me hold it up toward the camera if I can do this. It's very unsophisticated, but we see how it works. Look how tight the blue and white are twisted on the 6E versus the 5E. All right, so this is twisted tighter per pair, and we have a core in it that we see right there that helps keep each twisted pair further apart, although it's not by a whole lot. It is not. If we look at the tail end of these two, we're going to see that for all intents and purposes, they are the same diameter. Pretty close to it. They feel the same. They feel identical. In fact, the gray feels a little bit thicker. I think it has a little bit higher quality jacket on it. This I got from the phone company, and this is I bought off Amazon, so it's cheap. But you see the difference. There's a different technical difference in the cable, and with a tighter twist and with more spacing between the pairs, I think it helps keep down crosstalk and keeps the bit rate up. Now, you will notice if you look at wire specs, they'll talk about what data rate they're good for certain distances. So anytime you need to remember this, 6 is better than 5, E's are better than no E's, and if we take shorter distance, shorter is better than longer. So that's about what we need to know about the cable, that it does make a difference. How well you terminate your ends will also have an effect on it, that sort of thing. Well, we're about 13 minutes on the raw run time. Do we have time to look at some equipment on the Amazon? And we can kind of talk about what my thoughts were at the time. Anyway, here we are, Amazon. All right, so here we are, Amazon. Here's an option, an 8-port, which I would have liked to had that. 5 gigabit, that's twice what I have, right? So it's good for maybe NAS and PC and the Wi-Fi 7 router, because Wi-Fi 7 is faster than the 6. 5G adapter NIC, blah, blah, blah. But it's $200. Only sold 285. It's almost at my ratio of 80%. I want to see 80% 5-star when I try to buy something. That's kind of my base feeling, and I don't want any more than 5% on the rejects on the very bottom. Here's some other brand. I'm not really sure what it is, but it's only $82. It's cheaper than what I bought, but it says it's 10 in 100 base T, unmanaged fast Ethernet. Okay, that's probably going to be pretty good, but you see we're not going to get even 1 gigabit out of that according to this. This is pretty slow old. So it's not a great price, just looking at it the way I'm seeing it. TP-Link, I'm not really sure about TP-Link. I used to buy TP-Link, and when we had the DSL, and I had about 2 or 3 of their little routers go about 2 years and quit on me, so I'm not big on them. But look, it's only $13. All right, we can go on down. We can see about how much stuff costs. I think I bought Netgear. I'm a little better believing in Netgear than I am some of these no-name brands. Bros Trend. That sounds awfully Chinese. It says 8-port, 2.5 gigabit, $64, about half what I gave for the one I bought. Well, for the pizza of existence, the pizza resistance, let's move this project, which is almost 5 gigabyte, from here, from the local machine, this machine using the Wi-Fi 6. Let's go ahead and ship it to the beast, and it should just ask us, do we want to make the copy We'll see how long. Yes, let's replace the destination. Let's see what kind of speed we get out of the Wi-Fi 6. Says we're not running, but about 39 megabytes per second. That's downright slow. That's almost in the speed that we would expect for a USB thumb drive. And we're just about to wind that up, and you can see it's been a little bit rocky on the Wi-Fi. So what do you say now we check it on the 1 gigabit Ethernet that's just going to the switch into the other computer? So it's just no collision, straight from this computer to the switch to the other computer. We'll repeat the procedure, and we'll replace the files, and we'll see if it's any faster. Well, already we're at 111, 100, somewhere around 100 megabits per second, even though this is a gigabit connection. These are a practical file size, 4 gigabits in the transfer. So yeah, maybe the theoretic speed could be much higher, like we saw the 10 gigs or 9.6 on the Wi-Fi 6. We don't see that in real life. Here, we're also not seeing the full speed here, but it does look a lot faster. When this gets finished, we'll run the 2.5 gig and see what we get out of it. This is still running about 100, 110, 112. We now have it on that no-name Chinese NIC that we have set up there. We're going to see how it works at 2.5. It should be twice about that 112 or whatever. We were getting 100 to 112. Well, that 2.5 gigs is running about 240 megabytes a second. So it does appear that the faster Ethernet is in fact faster. About twice as fast. That's mucho better. I think I like that a lot better than what we had. So, could we have bought a 5 gig? Kind of wish I had, but I hadn't seen any that I really trusted that were out there. There was a no-name that I didn't recognize. I don't know how good the product would be, and it was, twice as much for twice as fast, but they only had 250 purchases. So I decided to go with a little slower and stick with a brand that I know and that I have a little more confidence with. Hope this hadn't been too terribly long. I know it's not, my videos don't tend to be too short. Of course, I don't really necessarily hit you the highlights. I try to hit you some usable information. So we appreciate you watching. We'll see you later.